Dust settled across the wedding altar as Sarah Blackwood collapsed, her white dress pooling around her like spilled milk. Poison worked quickly through her veins, a gift from the Morrow family who had sworn vengeance against her father years before. The crowd gasped, but only one man moved. Tsézhiné, the Apache healer who traded with the settlement, lifted her broken form with gentle hands that had known both war and healing. His eyes, dark as obsidian, held ancient knowledge as he carried her toward the sacred spring hidden in the canyon shadows. What happened in those canyon depths that transformed a dying bride into living legend? Did she truly vanish into the spirit? A world, or was there something more to the glowing footprints that led into the limestone cliffs? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Blackwood had always felt like a wildflower growing in a carefully tended garden. At 22, she stood out among the proper ladies of Copper Creek with her sun-bronzed skin and habit of riding astride rather than side saddle. Her mother's journal, bound in faded leather and filled with watercolor sketches of desert blooms, had been her constant companion since Elizabeth Blackwood succumbed to fever 7 years prior. "A lady does not gallop across open country like some savage," her father William would say, his voice carrying the weight of Eastern propriety he'd never quite abandoned despite 20 years in Arizona territory. On the morning before her wedding, Sarah sat at her vanity, fingers tracing the edge of her mother's journal. The pages revealed not just botanical observations, but glimpses into a woman who'd found unexpected beauty in this harsh landscape. Sarah had memorized every entry, every delicate brushstroke of ocotillo and prickly pear. "Miss Sarah, your father, is asking for you." Abigail, her lady's maid and closest confidant, stood in the doorway. At 40, the former slave had come west with the Blackwoods when Sarah was just a child. "Tell him I'm still preparing," Sarah replied, though her wedding dress hung ready on the wardrobe door, its pearl buttons gleaming in the morning light. Blackwood. Ranch spread across 5,000 acres of Arizona's richest grassland. From her bedroom window, Sarah could see the distant peaks of the Dragoon Mountains, their shadows sheltering Apache bands who maintained an uneasy peace with the settlers. Somewhere in those rocky slopes lived people her father called enemies, but whom her mother had written about with curiosity and respect. The marriage to Thomas Reynolds represented everything practical and proper. The joining of Blackwood cattle with Reynolds' railroad money would create an empire. Thomas himself was handsome enough, educated back east, and treated her with courteous attention. Yet Sarah felt nothing when he took her hand, no flutter when he kissed her cheek. "Your mother would be proud," her father said the night before, his voice softening in rare display of emotion. "This union secures our future." What he didn't mention was how it also sealed their protection against the Morrow family. 3 years. Earlier, James Morrow had lost his water rights dispute with William Blackwood, resulting in the failure of his ranch and the death of his wife during their forced relocation. The territorial courts had sided with Blackwood, but Morrow's hatred burned hotter than desert noon. In the settlement, whispers circulated about Apache raids and cavalry responses, about the medicine man who sometimes appeared at the trading post with herbs that cured fevers no doctor could break. Sarah had glimpsed him once, tall and silent, with eyes that seemed to look through rather than at people. The tribal interpreter called him Tsézhiné, meaning rock mirror, for his ability to reflect a person's true nature back to them. Sarah closed her mother's journal and tucked it beneath her pillow. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Thomas Reynolds, leaving behind the girl who sketched desert flowers and dreamed of understanding the mysteries of this wild land. She would do her duty to her father's legacy, even as something in her spirit rebelled against the cage being built around her, gilded though it might be. Outside, the Arizona sun climbed mercilessly upward, promising another day of relentless heat. In the distance, dust rose from the trail leading to town. the first wedding guests arriving at Blackwood Ranch for what everyone called the social event of the decade. And Sarah Blackwood, soon to surrender her name and freedom, prepared to play her part in a performance she never auditioned for. Dawn found Tsézhiné kneeling beside the sacred spring, his medicine pouch open before him. The small deerskin bag contained items ordinary to the eye but powerful to the spirit: an eagle feather, stones from the 4 sacred mountains, dried herbs gathered under specific moons, and a small clay vial of pollen. As the sun's first rays touched the canyon wall, he dipped his fingers into the clear water and marked his forehead with the blessing of the morning. At 35, Tsézhiné carried himself with the quiet dignity of one who had walked both the warrior's path and the healer's way. His face, weathered by sun and wind, revealed little of his thoughts to outsiders, but his eyes, dark and perceptive, missed nothing. The tribal elders had recognized his gift when he was just a boy, how he could sense sickness before symptoms appeared, how animals calmed at his approach. The spirits speak differently to you, Elder Nantai had told him years ago. This is both blessing and burden. The burden felt heavier with each passing season as more of his people succumbed to the white man's diseases or their bullets. The Chiricahua bands had resisted longest, but even they now faced the impossible choice between starvation and the reservation. Tsézhiné secured his medicine pouch and rose to his full height. From this hidden canyon, he could see smoke rising from Blackwood Ranch in the distance. He had been observing the rancher's daughter for months, not out of idle curiosity, but because the spring spirits had shown her to him in dreams. There was something about her, a quality that resonated with the ancient powers of this place. "You walk dangerous paths, brother," came a voice behind him. Nahilzai, his childhood friend and now a respected warrior, approached with silent steps. "The elders speak against your visits to the white settlement." "I go where healing is needed," Tsézhiné replied, his voice deep and measured. "And the rancher's daughter? What healing does she require that draws your eyes so often to their land?" There was no accusation in Nahilzai's tone, only concern. Tsézhiné touched the canyon wall, where ancient hands had carved symbols of power. "The springs have shown me her spirit. It does not belong to their world any more than the eagle belongs in a cage." "Her people build many cages," Nahilzai observed, "for eagles, for the people, even for themselves." Later, as Tsézhiné ground medicines in the village, Elder Nantai joined him. The old man's body had grown frail, but his mind remained sharp as an obsidian blade. "I have seen your thoughts, Tsézhiné," the elder said, settling beside the fire. "The spring spirits speak of change coming." Tsézhiné continued his work, crushing dried juniper berries with practiced motions. "The white settlement prepares for celebration, a wedding." Nantai's weathered face revealed nothing, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "Not all bindings are blessed by the true spirits. Some chains must be broken before a soul can find its path." He reached for Tsézhiné's medicine pouch, weighing it in his palm. "You carry enough medicine for a great healing or a great transformation." "I prepare for what the spirits show me," Tsézhiné answered. "The path between our world and theirs grows thin at certain places, certain times," Nantai said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The ancient ones knew how to walk between. Few remember now." "I remember," Tsézhiné said simply. As dusk approached, Tsézhiné stood at the edge of the village, looking toward the distant ranch. Tomorrow would bring the white people's ceremony, and with it, something the spring spirits had been preparing him for through countless dreams. He felt the weight of his medicine pouch against his chest, each sacred item humming with potential, energy. Whatever happened at the settlers' gathering, he would be ready to answer the calling that had guided his steps since boyhood. The obligation to heal, to protect, to preserve the balance between worlds. Blackwood Ranch transformed under the weight of impending celebration. Workers erected a grand pavilion, on the sun-baked yard where carriages now arrived hourly, bringing territorial officials, business associates, and social climbers eager to witness the union of two powerful families. Sarah's wedding dress hung by the window, catching morning light, her mother's final creation before illness took her. The ivory fabric, ordered from San Francisco, had been carefully embroidered with desert flowers by Elizabeth Blackwood's failing hands. "Something doesn't feel right about all this fuss," Abigail muttered, arranging Sarah's hair for the pre-wedding dinner. "Your mother wanted simpler things for you." Sarah met Abigail's eyes in the mirror. "Mother isn't here." "She's in every stitch of that dress," Abigail countered softly. The Reynolds family had arrived 3 days earlier, bringing Eastern sensibilities and barely disguised disdain for frontier living. Thomas's sister Eleanor, a sharp-featured woman of 25, made no attempt to hide her assessment of the Blackwood home. "How quaint that you've attempted to create civilization out here," she'd remarked, gloved finger tracing dust on a sideboard. "Thomas says you'll be returning east after the ceremony. Such a relief for you, I imagine." Sarah had smiled tightly. "No such plans have been discussed with me." That evening, William Blackwood hosted 20 guests for dinner, his weathered face uncharacteristically animated as he discussed railroad expansion with Gordon Reynolds, Thomas's father. The two patriarchs had spent months negotiating the marriage contract. Acreage and cattle herds weighed against railroad shares and Eastern connections. Thomas sat beside Sarah, occasionally patting her hand as if calming a nervous mare. "Father, says Will winter in Boston. You'll need a proper wardrobe, of course." "My home is here," Sarah replied, watching her father's satisfied expression across the table. She felt suddenly acutely aware of decisions being made about her life without her consultation. Outside the dining room windows, ranch hands kept watch. The territorial governor's presence required security, but the real concern was James Morrow. 3 years had passed since the water rights dispute that ruined him, yet his threats lingered. William had doubled the guards and sent scouts to track Morrow's movements. What no one watched for was the silent figure observing from the distant ridge. Tsézhiné had come at the springs urging, drawn by premonition. He witnessed the ranch's transformation with troubled spirit, sensing disruption in the natural order. Late that night, while the household finally quieted, Sarah slipped outside to the small garden her mother had cultivated. The desert air cooled quickly after sunset, and she wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders. Having second thoughts, a voice emerged from the shadows. Robert Morrow, James's son, stepped into the moonlight. Once Sarah's childhood friend, now he stood on family land as an enemy. "Robert, you shouldn't be here." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The guards won't see me." His face had grown leaner, harder in the years since his family's downfall. "I came to see if the rumors were true. Sarah Blackwood, marrying into railroad money." "You know nothing about my situation," she replied. "I know your father destroyed. Mine for profit. I know what it means to lose everything." His eyes reflected moonlight, dangerous and bright. "Does your groom know you once promised to wait for me?" Sarah stepped back. "We were children, Robert. Go before someone sees you." His laugh held no humor. "No one sees the Morrows anymore. We've become ghosts, thanks to your father." He reached into his pocket, withdrew a small silver flask, a wedding gift. Traditional, they say, for the bride to drink to absent friends the night before. Sarah didn't take it. "Please leave." "As you wish." He tucked the flask away with a courtly bow that mocked her. "But remember, Sarah, some debts can't be settled with money." After he vanished into the darkness, Sarah remained in the garden, her mother's plants offering silent comfort. Tomorrow she would speak vows binding her to a man chosen by her father, in the ceremony designed to display wealth and cement power. The desert night offered no answers, only the distant howl of a coyote that seemed to echo her unspoken questions. The wedding altar stood beneath an arch of imported flowers, wilting in the Arizona heat. Chairs arranged in precise rows held the territory's finest citizens, fanning themselves as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Territorial Governor Adams sat in the front row, his presence elevating the Blackwood-Reynolds Union to an affair of political significance. From the shade of a distant cottonwood, Robert Morrow watched. His hands were steady as he uncorked the small crystal vial his father had procured at great expense from a disgraced doctor in Tucson. The liquid inside, clear and odorless, had crossed an ocean and a continent to serve its purpose here. Justice, his father called it, though Robert's certainty wavered as he recalled Sarah's face in the moonlight. Inside the main house, Sarah stood before a mirror in her mother's creation. The ivory dress fit perfectly, though she felt like an impostor wearing it. "Your mother would be proud," Abigail said, adjusting the veil. "You look just like her." "Would she be proud of this match?" Sarah asked softly. Abigail's reflection met her gaze. "She would want your happiness above all." The wedding procession began with military precision. William Blackwood, resplendent, in a new suit ordered from St. Louis, escorted his daughter across the yard to the waiting assembly. Thomas stood at the altar, hair slicked back, expression appropriately solemn. Beside him, the circuit preacher dabbed sweat from his brow while holding a Bible bound in calfskin. From his vantage point among the trading post representatives invited as a courtesy, Tsézhiné observed the white people's ceremony with outward impassivity. Inwardly his spirit sensed gathering shadows. The sacred waters had shown him visions of this day, though their meaning remained unclear. His medicine pouch hung heavy against his chest, the contents assembled according to the dream teachings. The ceremony proceeded as rehearsed. Sarah spoke her responses mechanically, her voice carrying across the assembled guests. When the preacher called for the ceremonial cup to seal their union, Thomas lifted the silver goblet with appropriate gravity. The traditional gesture, bride and groom sharing wine before the assembly, had been Gordon Reynolds' contribution, an Eastern refinement. Robert Morrow moved then, sliding between servants with practiced ease. His hand emptied the vial's contents into the wine when attention fixed on the preacher's words. The liquid dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. Thomas drank first, then offered the cup to Sarah. She hesitated only briefly before accepting it, taking the required sip of bitter wine. The cup returned to the altar table as the preacher continued his blessing. The poison worked with devastating efficiency. 3 sentences into the final prayer, Sarah's breathing changed. Her hands, clasped demurely before her, began to tremble. Thomas glanced sideways, momentary irritation becoming concern as Sarah's face drained of color. "Are you—" he began but never finished. Sarah collapsed between one heartbeat and the next, her mother's carefully crafted dress billowing around her like a white cloud as she struck the ground. The assembly erupted in shocked exclamations. William Blackwood pushed forward, face contorted with disbelief. "My daughter! Someone fetch the doctor!" Governor Adams rose to his feet, security men forming a protective circle as chaos overtook the ceremony. Thomas knelt beside his fallen bride, calling her name with increasing desperation. Eleanor Reynolds fainted dramatically, drawing attention from several gentlemen while her mother wept into a handkerchief. Through the pandemonium, Tsézhiné moved with quiet purpose. The spring spirit's guidance crystallized into sudden clarity. This was the moment they had prepared him for. He crossed the space between observer and participant in long strides, reaching Sarah before anyone could interfere. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingers. The poison, he recognized its effect, immediately would claim her within minutes without intervention. With the decisiveness born of absolute certainty, he gathered Sarah's limp form into his arms. Her veil caught briefly on the altar before tearing free. "Stop! What are you doing?" William Blackwood's command cut through the chaos. Tsézhiné met the rancher's gaze without flinching. "She dies unless I take her now." His voice, rarely heard by white ears, carried surprising authority. Before anyone could react, He turned and moved swiftly toward the canyon path, Sarah's white dress spilling over his arms like water over stone. Behind him, shouting erupted as realization dawned. An Apache was carrying away the Blackwood bride. Tsézhiné moved swiftly across terrain few white men had navigated. The canyon entrance, hidden behind a stand of juniper trees, opened into a corridor of ancient red stone. Sarah's breathing grew more labored with each passing minute, her skin taking on an alarming bluish tint. The poison was advancing rapidly through her system. The canyon deepened, its walls rising to block the harsh afternoon sun. Petroglyphs appeared on the stone faces, handprints, spirals, and animal forms carved by ancestors centuries before. Tsézhiné felt their presence watching, judging his intrusion with the white woman in his arms. "Hold to this world," he murmured. In his native tongue, "The threshold approaches, but your time to cross is not yet come." The sacred spring emerged around a final bend, a pool of impossibly clear water fed by underground sources. Here, the canyon opened into a small amphitheater ringed by stone that glowed red gold in the slanting sunlight. Ancient ones had built a stone altar beside the water, its surface worn smooth by countless ceremonies. Tsézhiné laid Sarah gently upon this altar. Her wedding dress spread around her like wings, the delicate embroidery now stained with dust and sweat. Her pulse fluttered erratically beneath his fingertips. The poison had nearly completed its work. From his medicine pouch, he withdrew a clay vessel no larger than his palm. This he dipped into the spring, filling it with water that caught the light in ways ordinary water did not. The spring had existed before his people came to these lands, its powers acknowledged by all who encountered it. Stories told of miraculous healings, of visions granted to those worthy, of doorways opened between worlds. "Mother of waters," he addressed the spring in ceremonial language, "I bring one who stands at the threshold. The shadow walkers have marked her for the final journey, but the spirits have shown her path crossing mine. I ask for the ancient healing." The canyon seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind stilled as Tsézhiné tilted Sarah's head back gently and brought the clay vessel to her lips. Water trickled into her mouth, some spilling down her chin to darken the bodice of her wedding dress. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Sarah's body convulsed violently, nearly throwing her from the altar. Tsézhiné held her steady, continuing the ancient chants passed down through generations of medicine people. He placed one hand over her heart, the other upon her forehead, forming a circuit for the healing energies to flow. "Return, wandering spirit," he called. "The darkness has not claimed you yet." As the sun lowered toward the canyon rim, something shifted in the air around them. The spring's surface rippled without wind, and faint luminescence appeared within its depths. The petroglyphs on the canyon walls seemed to deepen, their outlines growing more distinct as shadows lengthened. Sarah's eyelids fluttered. Her breathing, nearly stopped minutes before, strengthened. Tsézhiné continued the healing chant, his deep voice echoing against stone walls that had witnessed countless rituals through the centuries. "Fight the shadow walker's touch," he urged her. "Return to the living world." The space between worlds thinned as twilight approached. This was the dangerous time, when spirits moved more freely between realms, when the recently departed could be called back, when transformations became possible. Tsézhiné sensed presences gathering around the spring, ancestral witnesses to the unfolding ceremony. Sarah's eyes opened suddenly, though her gaze seemed focused on something beyond the physical world. Her lips moved, forming words in a language she couldn't possibly know. Tsézhiné recognized phrases from the ancient, healing songs, prayers spoken only by those initiated into the deepest mysteries. "How do you speak these words?" he asked, momentarily breaking his ceremonial concentration. Her eyes found his, recognition dawning through the haze of poison and healing trance. "I hear them, singing from the water." Her voice sounded strange, even to her own ears, resonating with harmonics that hadn't been present before. The healing had begun, but Tsézhiné recognized signs he'd only heard described in the eldest stories. The transformation was taking an unexpected turn. The spring spirits had not merely pushed back death, they had marked Sarah as their own. The poison that should have killed her was instead becoming a catalyst for something ancient and powerful. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above the canyon rim, Tsézhiné realized the path forward had changed. This was no longer just a healing, but a rebirth. William Blackwood's rage transformed the wedding site into a military operation. Ranch hands abandoned their serving duties for rifles, while the territorial governor's security detail offered additional manpower. Within 15 minutes of Sarah's abduction, 20 armed men gathered in the yard. "I want that Apache devil found before sundown," Blackwood bellowed, checking the chambers of his Remington rifle. The weapon, polished to a shine for the wedding, now returned to its intended purpose. $500 to the man who brings my daughter back safely. Thomas Reynolds stood nearby, his face pale with shock, wedding suit incongruously formal amid the gathering posse. "Mr. Blackwood, surely we should wait for the cavalry. My daughter could be dead by then," Blackwood cut him off. "These savages can't be trusted." Abigail pushed through the crowd of men, her voice rising with unusual force. "That's not just any Apache, Mr. Blackwood. That's Tsézhiné, the healer. I've seen him treat fever victims in town when doctors gave up hope." "Why would he take her?" Thomas asked, struggling to comprehend the situation. "He said she was dying," came a quiet voice. Benjamin Hawk, a half-Cherokee scout who occasionally worked for Blackwood, stepped forward. Though educated in Eastern schools, Hawk had returned west, walking the uneasy line between two worlds. "I heard him clear as day. Said she dies unless he takes her now." Blackwood's expression hardened. "Convenient excuse for kidnapping." "A wine," Abigail interjected. "Miss Sarah collapsed right after drinking. Something wasn't right." Governor Adams approached, flanked by aides. "Blackwood, if there's been foul play beyond the Apache's actions, that's a territorial matter. I'm placing Captain Wilson in charge of this pursuit." He gestured to his security chief, a weathered cavalry veteran. "This is my land, Governor," Blackwood protested. "And my jurisdiction," Adams replied firmly. "Captain Wilson will lead, with your men's assistance and knowledge of the terrain." Benjamin Hawk studied the ground where Tsézhiné had stood. "He's headed for Whispering Canyon. There's a spring there the Apache consider sacred. You know this place?" Captain Wilson asked. Hawk nodded. "I can find it." The search party assembled quickly, dividing into 3 groups to cover possible routes. Blackwood insisted on leading, on himself, with Thomas Reynolds awkwardly accompanying him, still in his formal wear, but now armed with a borrowed pistol. Captain Wilson commanded the 2nd group, while Benjamin Hawk guided the 3rd along what he believed was Tsézhiné's most likely path. As they mounted up, Abigail approached Hawk's horse. "Please," she said quietly, "remember that Miss Sarah might need that healer more than she needs rescue." Hawk met her eyes with understanding. "I know something about medicines from both worlds, Miss Abigail. I'll keep that in mind." The riders departed in clouds of dust, leaving behind bewildered wedding guests and a devastated reception. Eleanor Reynolds had recovered from her fainting spell and now comforted her mother while simultaneously directing servants to pack their belongings. "We're leaving immediately," she declared. "This savage territory is absolutely beyond civilized tolerance." As the search parties entered the rugged foothills, the sun sank toward the western horizon. Shadows lengthened across arroyos and mesas, creating deceptive shapes that slowed their progress. Blackwood drove his men mercilessly forward, ignoring the increasingly difficult terrain. "Sir," one ranch hand ventured, "the horses need rest if we're to continue effectively." "My daughter is in the hands of an Apache," Blackwood replied through clenched teeth. "We don't stop until we find her." Thomas Reynolds, struggling to control his mount on the rocky slope, finally spoke up. "Mr. Blackwood, If Sarah was truly poisoned, shouldn't we be concerned about who did it? The Apache may actually be helping her. Blackwood reined his horse around sharply. Are you suggesting I should be grateful my daughter was carried off by a savage on her wedding day? I'm suggesting we consider all possibilities, Thomas replied with unexpected firmness. In the deepening twilight, Benjamin Hawke's group moved most efficiently. Having dismissed the 2 territorial officers assigned to him, Hawke followed signs few others would notice: a scuff mark on stone, disturbed gravel on a narrow path, a broken twig from a juniper bush. Near the canyon entrance, he dismounted and knelt to examine the ground. There, caught on a thorny branch, was a small scrap of ivory fabric embroidered with desert flowers, Sarah's wedding dress. Hawke pocketed the fragment and gazed at the darkening canyon ahead. You've brought her to the old powers, he whispered. May they look kindly on you both. Sarah floated in a realm between worlds. Her consciousness drifted like mist above the sacred spring, observing her physical body below, pale and still upon the stone altar, attended by the Apache healer whose hands moved in rhythmic patterns. Above her heart and throat, the poison that had gripped her body now seemed distant, a fading memory rather than an immediate threat. Am I dead? She wondered, though no sound emerged from her spiritual form. Not dead. Between. The voice came, from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly into her mind. From the spring waters rose shimmering figures, ancestors of this land who had guarded the sacred place for centuries. Their forms weren't fully human, blending animal aspects with human features in ways that should have terrified her but instead felt profoundly right. One spirit approached, a woman with eyes like pools of starlight. You were meant to come here, daughter of elsewhere. The poison was merely the path. Sarah struggled to comprehend. I don't understand. Some souls are born in the wrong world, another spirit explained. This one bearing the aspects of both, elder and eagle. Rare ones can cross. Below, Tsézhiné continued his healing ritual, unaware of the gathering spirits visible only to Sarah's disembodied consciousness. He pressed the sacred water to her lips again, his deep voice chanting prayers that resonated through both worlds. He cannot see us yet, the eagle elder explained, though he walks closer to the threshold than most. Sarah felt a strange pulling sensation, her spirit form drawn back toward her physical body with each sip of the spring water. I should return, she realized. Yes, the starlight-eyed woman agreed, but not as you were. The threshold is open to you now, walking between one. Memories cascaded through Sarah's consciousness, her mother's quiet understanding of this land, her own inexplicable longing for something beyond the confines of settler life, dreams of canyon voices calling her name. They weren't random, they were preparation. The healer was sent to guide you, the spirits explained, as he was guided before. Near the spring stood an ancient petroglyph, distinct from the others, carved deeper into the living rock. It depicted a female figure with 1 foot in water, 1 on land, surrounded by spiraling light. The image pulsed with its own luminescence as Sarah's attention fixed upon it. Others have crossed before, the eagle elder said. Rarely, when both worlds require balance. With sudden clarity, Sarah understood she was seeing the canyon's deepest magic. Knowledge hidden from both Apache and settler, preserved by spirits who predated both peoples. This spring had been sacred long before humans named it so. Below, her body convulsed again. Tsézhiné placed both hands on her shoulders, anchoring her to the physical world. Return, he commanded, his voice penetrating the spirit realm. Your journey is not complete. The starlight-eyed spirit touched Sarah's incorporeal form. Go back, but carry us with you. The crossing has begun. Sarah felt herself pulled downward, spirit reconnecting with flesh. The sensation burned like fire and froze like ice simultaneously. Transformation begun at the most fundamental level. She gasped, physical lungs filling with air that tasted sharper, richer than any she'd breathed before. Her eyes opened to see Tsézhiné's face, lined with exhaustion but bright with wonder. "You return," he said simply. "I saw them," Sarah whispered. "The guardians of the spring." Surprise flickered across his features. "You walked in the spirit world?" "They said I was meant to come here, that the poison was just the path." Her voice sounded strange to her ears, harmonic overtones lingering in each word. Tsézhiné studied her with new understanding. "The old stories speak of this, those marked for transformation." He gestured to the petroglyph. "The crossing one." Sarah turned to see the ancient carving, now recognizing herself in its form. "What's happening to me? The space between worlds grows thin at certain times, certain places," he explained, echoing his elder's words. "For those whose spirits belong to both worlds, transformation becomes possible." The last light of day faded from the canyon rim above. In the gathering darkness, Sarah noticed her hands faintly glowing, a subtle luminescence emanating from beneath her skin. The wedding dress, symbol of her former life, now seemed like a costume from a half-forgotten dream. "They're coming," she said suddenly, sensing the search parties drawing nearer. "My father, the others." Tsézhiné nodded grimly. "They will not understand what happens here. Will I become spirit?" Sarah asked, touching her glowing skin with wonder. "Not spirit alone, not flesh alone." Tsézhiné helped her to sit upright. "Something the old ones called Naga, the walker between worlds." Benjamin Hawk entered the canyon alone, leaving his horse tethered at the entrance. The remaining men in his group had insisted on waiting for Captain Wilson's party before proceeding, but Hawk knew delay could prove dangerous for all involved. The twilight deepened around him as he moved silently along the ancient pathway, recognizing signs few white men would notice. Small cairns marking sacred turns, petroglyphs indicating direction to those who understood their meaning. Meanwhile, in the heart of the canyon, Sarah took her first tentative steps since the poisoning. Her legs trembled like a newborn fawn's, unaccustomed to the energy now flowing through them. Tsézhiné supported her with a gentle hand beneath her elbow. "The weakness will pass," he assured her. "The spring's power works through you now." Sarah's wedding dress, practical despite its beauty, had been designed for a church ceremony rather than canyon exploration. The long skirt caught on rocks and a brush. Without hesitation, Tsézhiné withdrew a small obsidian blade from his belt and offered it to her. "You must choose what to carry forward," he said simply. Sarah understood. With deliberate movements, she cut away the voluminous outer layer of the skirt, leaving the simpler underskirt that fell just below her knees. The discarded fabric, her mother's meticulous embroidery, she folded carefully and placed upon a rock. "A gift to the spirits," she said, somehow knowing this was appropriate. Tsézhiné nodded approval, then knelt to remove his moccasins. "The path ahead requires proper footing." He offered them to her. "But what will you wear?" Sarah asked. "I have walked these canyons since childhood," he replied. "My feet know the way." The moccasins, crafted from deer hide and sinew, fit surprisingly well. As Sarah slipped them on, she felt an immediate connection to the ground beneath her, sensations of warmth, age, and living energy that ordinary footwear would have blocked. "Can you hear the canyon speaking?" Tsézhiné asked. Sarah tilted her head, listening. What had been indistinct whispers earlier now resolved into clearer impressions. Not quite words, but definite communications. "Yes, it's like memories in the stone." "The crossing has begun," he confirmed. "Your spirit opens to this place." Elsewhere in the canyon network, William Blackwood drove his search party relentlessly forward, ignoring their concerns about navigating the treacherous terrain in fading light. Thomas Reynolds had fallen twice already, his city shoes unsuited for the rocky path. Blackwood barely acknowledged the younger man's struggles, his mind fixed solely on retrieving his daughter. "Sir," a ranch hand ventured, "tracking in darkness is dangerous. We should make camp and continue at first light. "My daughter is with that savage," Blackwood replied through clenched teeth. "We continue." Thomas Reynolds finally spoke up, his patience exhausted. "This is madness, Mr. Blackwood. Your men are right. We're more likely to break our necks than find Sarah in this darkness." Blackwood rounded on his would-be son-in-law. "Feel free to return to the ranch, Reynolds. I expected more backbone from the man who would marry my daughter." "I want to find Sarah as much as you do," Thomas insisted, "but I want to find her alive. This recklessness serves no one." Back at the sacred spring, Sarah and Tsézhiné prepared to move deeper into the canyon. The transformation process had only begun, and Tsézhiné explained they needed to reach a specific location before it progressed further. "There is a place where the walls thin even more," he said, gathering his medicine pouch. "A doorway of sorts, used by healers since the before time." "My father will never stop searching," Sarah said, her enhanced senses now detecting the distant approach of the search parties. "He'll bring men with guns." Tsézhiné's expression remained impassive. "The canyon protects its own. Now that you've begun the crossing, you are under its protection too." As they prepared to leave the spring, Benjamin Hawk appeared at the chamber entrance. Sarah instinctively moved behind Tsézhiné, but the scout raised empty hands in a gesture of peace. "I mean no harm," Hawk said, addressing Tsézhiné in the Apache tongue. "I come alone." Tsézhiné studied him carefully. "You walk between worlds also, but differently." Hawk nodded, then switched to English. "Sarah, are you hurt?" "Your father has raised half the territory to find you." Sarah stepped forward, allowing Hawk to see the subtle glow that had begun to emanate from her skin. "I'm not hurt, Benjamin. I'm changing." Hawk's eyes widened. He recognized the signs from old Cherokee stories. The luminescence, the harmonics. In her voice, "The threshold crossing," he whispered. "I thought it was just legend." In the Apache encampment, Elder Nantai sat before a small fire, his weathered hands cradling a sacred pipe carved from red stone. Though his physical eyes had grown cloudy with age, his spirit vision remained sharp. As smoke rose from the pipe, carrying prayers to the ancestors, Nantai's awareness expanded beyond the physical world. The vision came suddenly, vivid images of the sacred canyon, the spring, and Tsézhiné performing the ancient healing ritual. But what shocked the elder was the sight of a white woman glowing with spirit energy, her transformation already beginning. The ancestors gathered around her, their approval evident in their gestures and expressions. "Nahilzai!" Nantai called, his voice cutting through the evening quiet. "Bring the council!" The Apache warriors gathered quickly, sensing urgency in the elder's summons. Nahilzai, Tsézhiné's childhood friend, was first to arrive, followed by the other council members. They sat in a circle around Nantai's fire, respectful silence prevailing until the elder spoke. "The crossing one appears," Nantai announced, his voice surprisingly strong. "After 7 generations of waiting, the prophecy unfolds." Murmurs rippled through the gathered men. The prophecy of the crossing one was ancient, preserved through oral tradition across centuries, a being who would bridge worlds during times of great change, healing the divide between peoples. "Who is this crossing one?" Nahilzai asked. "A white woman," Nantai replied, causing shocked expressions. "The rancher's daughter, taken by Tsézhiné to the sacred spring." "Impossible," one warrior objected. "The prophecy speaks of one with the blood of the people." Nantai held up his hand for silence. "The prophecy speaks of one whose spirit recognizes the old ways, regardless of flesh. The spring spirits have chosen. The white soldiers will blame us for taking her," Nahilzai warned. "They will come with guns." "Yes," Nantai agreed, "which is why we must protect the sacred canyon until the transformation completes. If interrupted, both worlds suffer." The council debated briefly before reaching consensus. 10 warriors would ride immediately to the canyon, not to interfere with the ceremony, but to ensure no outsiders disrupted it. Nahilzai would lead them, under strict instructions to avoid bloodshed if possible. "What of Tsézhiné?" a younger warrior asked. "Is he in danger?" "Tsézhiné walks his destiny," Nantai replied. "The spring spirits prepared him for this moment since boyhood." The elder's eyes grew distant again, seeing beyond the physical realm. "But the transformation brings great risk. The threshold between worlds thins, allowing passage in both directions." "What does this mean?" Nahilzai asked. "It means others may cross through, spirits not bound by flesh, some benevolent, others hungry." Nantai reached for his medicine bag, withdrawing items needed for a protection ritual. "While Tsézhiné guides the crossing one, we must strengthen the boundaries." As the warriors prepared to depart, Nantai made his surprising announcement. "I will accompany you." "Elder, the journey is difficult," Nahilzai protested. "My body is old," Nantai interrupted, "but my spirit is needed. Only I remember the ancient songs that seal the threshold once the crossing completes." While the warriors gathered weapons and horses, Nantai performed the protection ritual, burning sacred herbs and chanting prayers that shimmered in the smoke. Through his spirit vision he observed the canyon miles away, saw the search parties approaching from multiple directions, sensed the threshold thinning as Sarah's transformation progressed. Most concerning was the darkness gathering at the canyon's edges, hungry spirits drawn to the power of the ceremony, waiting for opportunity. If the transformation was interrupted at the wrong moment, these entities could slip through the temporarily weakened barrier between worlds. "Hurry," Nantai urged as he mounted the gentle mare brought for him. The white men approach the sacred, place with anger in their hearts. They do not understand what forces they risk awakening. The Apache band rode into the night, following ancient trails known only to their people. Nantai, despite his physical frailty, sat straight in his saddle, drawing strength from the urgency of their mission. His medicine pipe, secured in a special pouch, would be needed before dawn. 7 generations waiting, he murmured to the stars above. The healing of 2 worlds begins tonight if we can protect the sacred threshold. In his vision, Nantai had glimpsed something he hadn't shared with the others, the completed form of the crossing one, neither fully human nor fully spirit, glowing with power that could either heal the divide between peoples or, if mishandled, deepen it irreparably. The responsibility weighed heavily on his ancient shoulders. Captain Wilson's search party joined with Blackwood's group at the canyon entrance as the sun balanced on the western horizon. The captain, a veteran of Apache campaigns, studied the narrowing walls with professional concern. "Perfect place for an ambush," he observed. "We should proceed with caution." William Blackwood checked his pocket watch, a gold timepiece that had accompanied him from Boston decades earlier. Nearly 4 hours had passed since Sarah's abduction. "My daughter could be dead while we stand here debating, or she could be receiving the help she needs," Thomas Reynolds suggested, earning a withering glare from his almost father-in-law. Captain Wilson deployed his men in strategic formation. 2 scouts ahead, main group follows, rear guard watching our backs. No unnecessary shots, the sound carries in these canyons. Deeper within the stone labyrinth, Tsézhiné led Sarah and Benjamin Hawk toward the inner sanctuary, where the transformation could complete safely. Sarah's condition had progressed rapidly. Her skin now emanated a soft glow, visible even in daylight, and her movements had acquired a fluid grace that seemed almost choreographed with the canyon itself. The threshold place lies beyond the narrow impassage, Tsézhiné explained, indicating a crevice barely wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. There, the Ancient Ones crossed between worlds when necessary. Benjamin Hawk studied Sarah with barely concealed awe. Having grown up with Cherokee legends of spirit walkers, he recognized the rarity of what he was witnessing. "The settlers are coming," he warned. "I count at least 15 men, armed and angry." "Can you delay them?" Tsézhiné asked. Hawk nodded. "I can try, but Blackwood isn't likely to listen to reason. Sarah touched Hawk's arm, her fingers leaving momentary trails of light where they connected. "Tell my father I made this choice. Tell him I'm not being held against my will." "Will he believe that?" Hawk asked gently. "Probably not," Sarah admitted, "but I need you to try." As Benjamin Hawk departed to intercept the search parties, Tsézhiné guided Sarah toward the narrow passage. Her wedding dress, even in its modified form, caught against the stone walls. "I need to leave more behind," she realized, again sensing the rightness of what must be done. Using the obsidian knife, she cut away more fabric until only a simple shift remained, resembling the garments worn by Apache women. The discarded material she placed carefully at the passage entrance, a marker for those who followed, and another surrender of her former life. The search parties progressed deeper into the canyon, finding signs of passage that increased their urgency. A scrap of wedding veil caught on a branch, footprints showing a heavy burden carried. Thomas Reynolds noted something the others missed, a second set of prints, emerging from where Sarah had apparently been set down. "She's walking," he pointed out. "Doesn't seem like someone being dragged against her will." "Indians have ways of making captives comply," Captain Wilson replied grimly. As the light faded from the canyon, creating treacherous shadows, the search party rounded a bend and confronted Benjamin Hawk standing calmly in their path. "That's far enough," Hawk announced, hands visible and empty. "Out of our way, half-breed," one of Blackwood's men growled. William Blackwood pushed forward. "Where is my daughter?" "Safe," Hawk replied, "and healing. The poison nearly killed her." "What poison?" Thomas asked sharply. "She collapsed after drinking." "The ceremonial wine," Hawk explained. Tsézhiné recognized the symptoms and took her to the sacred spring, the only place with medicine strong enough to save her. Captain Wilson signaled his men to lower their weapons slightly. "You expect us to believe an Apache kidnapped a white woman to save her?" "I've seen her," Hawk confirmed. "She's alive because of him. And she asked me to tell you, Mr. Blackwood, that she's there by choice." Blackwood's face darkened. "Choice? What choice does a poisoned girl have? Step aside, Hawk." "I can't do that, sir." Thomas Reynolds studied Hawk's face, searching for deception and finding none. "If she was poisoned, at our wedding, who did it and why?" Before Hawk could answer, a sound echoed through the canyon, rhythmic hoofbeats approaching rapidly from the direction they had come. Captain Wilson's rear guard appeared, breathless. "Captain! Apache riders! At least 10 warriors coming up fast!" The situation escalated instantly. Wilson's men took defensive positions while Blackwood raised his rifle, aiming directly at Benjamin Hawk. "Last chance," Blackwood threatened. "Take us to Sarah now." At that moment, the canyon shadows seemed to deepen unnaturally. The setting sun cast a final ray that illuminated the narrow passage beyond Hawk, revealing Sarah's spectral form emerging. Her transformation had progressed significantly, her body semi-transparent, luminous patterns flowing beneath her skin like living constellations. "Father," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that echoed strangely from the canyon walls, "I am here by choice." William Blackwood's rifle wavered, then lowered slowly as he stared at his daughter's transformed appearance. The assembled men fell silent, faces registering shock, disbelief, and in some cases, instinctive fear of the inexplicable. "Sarah," Thomas Reynolds whispered, taking an unconscious step backward. "What's happened to you?" Sarah moved forward into the fading light, each step leaving a momentary luminous impression on the canyon floor. Her physical form seemed to shift between solidity and translucence with her movements. "I was dying," she said, her voice resonating unnaturally in the enclosed space. "The poison would have killed me in minutes. Tsézhiné brought me to the only place that could save me." Captain Wilson maintained his professional composure, though his knuckles whitened around his holstered pistol. "Miss Blackwood, whatever these Apache have done to you, they've done nothing I didn't allow," Sarah interrupted. Behind her, Tsézhiné emerged from the passageway, his expression solemn as he assessed the armed men. "The sacred spring began healing the poison, But something else happened. Something meant to happen for generations. At that moment, hoofbeats echoed through the canyon as Nahilzai and the Apache warriors arrived, weapons ready but not yet raised. They formed a protective semicircle behind Hawk, creating a standoff with the search parties. Elder Nantai dismounted with assistance, his ancient frame belying the power in his voice as he addressed the gathering in careful English. The prophecy unfolds. The Crossing One appears after 7 generations. "What nonsense is this?" Blackwood demanded, finding his voice again. "Sarah, come back with us now. Whatever spell they've put on you—" "No spell, Father," Sarah replied. She reached up and unpinned what remained of her wedding veil, letting it drift to the ground between them, a line drawn between her past and future. "For the first time, I see clearly. I understand why Mother was so drawn to this land, why I never felt I belonged in your world." Thomas stepped forward cautiously, studying Sarah with a mixture of fear and fascination. Unlike Blackwood's rage, Thomas displayed curiosity alongside his shock. "You're glowing. How is this possible?" Tsézhiné spoke, his deep voice commanding attention even from those who viewed him as an enemy. The Ancient Ones knew pathways between worlds. Rarely one appears who can walk these paths, one whose spirit belongs to both realms. "She is such a one." "Superstitious nonsense," Captain Wilson declared. "Miss Blackwood needs medical attention." "I've never felt more alive," Sarah countered. The luminescence beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with her words. The poison opened the door, but the choice to step through is mine. Elder Nantai moved forward, leaning heavily on a walking stick adorned with eagle feathers and medicine bundles. As he approached, even the skeptical soldiers felt a palpable shift in the canyon's atmosphere, a pressure change as before a storm. When worlds drift too far apart, the spirits choose a bridge, Nantai explained. In each age, a crossing one appears to restore balance. The last was 7 generations past, when my grandfather's grandfather witnessed the ceremony. Benjamin Hawk translated additional details for those whose English was limited. The prophecy says the Crossing One will appear when the land itself cries out for healing, when peoples who should live as brothers instead face each other with weapons and hatred. William Blackwood's composure cracked. "This is my daughter. You filled her head with primitive superstitions while she was vulnerable." "Father," Sarah said gently, "I've seen the spirit world. I've spoken with ancestors who watched over this canyon since before our family ever set foot on this continent. This is my path." The standoff intensified as shadows deepened in the canyon. The warriors behind Nahilzai and the armed settlers, both tensed, weapons inching upward despite their leader's restraint. Thomas Reynolds surprised everyone by stepping into the space between the groups. He reached slowly into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band, the wedding ring Never, placed on Sarah's finger. "Is this truly what you want, Sarah?" he asked, his voice carrying genuine concern rather than accusation. "It is," she answered simply. Thomas studied her for a long moment, then placed the ring atop her discarded veil. "Then I release you from our arrangement." "You have no authority," Blackwood began, but Thomas cut him off. "Neither do you, sir. Not anymore." He turned to face the assembled men. "We came to rescue Sarah from danger. She's clearly not in danger. Our purpose here is finished." Elder Nantai's weathered face creased in a smile. "The young man shows wisdom." He gestured toward the spring deeper in the canyon, where light had begun to gather unnaturally. "The time comes. The threshold opens with the rising of the evening star." Sarah looked toward the canyon entrance, where the first star appeared in the darkening sky. "I must complete what began with the poison. I must choose." The canyon darkened as night claimed the sky, but darkness didn't fall upon the gathered witnesses. Instead, the sacred spring began to illuminate with an internal radiance, its waters transforming from clear to luminescent blue. The light spread outward, touching the ancient petroglyphs and causing them to glow with the same ethereal energy. "The threshold opens," Elder Nantai announced, his voice carrying unexpected strength. "The ceremony must proceed uninterrupted, or both worlds face a consequence." Despite his objections, William Blackwood found himself silenced by the undeniable power manifesting before him. Captain Wilson signaled his men to lower their weapons, his military experience recognizing when retreat proved wiser than confrontation. Sarah turned to Tsézhiné, question in her eyes. He nodded gravely. "The final step must be your choice, freely given." She understood. The partial transformation could be halted. She could return to the human world forever changed, but still bound by its limitations. Or she could complete the crossing, becoming something neither fully human nor fully spirit. "What will I become?" she asked. "Naga," Elder Nantai answered, "the walker between worlds. Your essence will remain, but your form will transcend ordinary flesh." Thomas Reynolds, still standing in the neutral ground between opposing forces, watched with scholarly fascination, overtaking his personal loss. "This defies all scientific understanding," he murmured. "Some truths exist beyond your science." Tsézhiné replied without condescension. Sarah approached the spring's edge, its waters now pulsing with rhythmic light that matched the luminescence beneath her skin. She knelt and dipped her fingers into the glowing liquid. The connection sent visible energy coursing up her arm, across her shoulders, and throughout her body. "I understand now," she whispered. With deliberate grace, she rose and entered the water fully, her simple shift billowing around her as she waded deeper. The spring, typically shallow, seemed to deepen impossibly to accommodate her immersion. The water embraced her, light spiraling around her form. Tsézhiné removed his ceremonial items and placed them at the spring's edge. Then, to the surprise of all present, he too entered the water. His role as guide required him to accompany her to the threshold, though not necessarily beyond. "What is he doing?" Blackwood demanded, finding his voice again. "Completing his purpose?" Nantai explained. "The crossing one requires a guide for the final passage." The Apache warriors began a rhythmic chant, their voices blending with the resonant energies emanating from the spring. The canyon itself seemed to join the song, wind moving through stone passages, creating harmonics that no human instrument could produce. As Sarah and Tsézhiné reached the center of the now expansive spring, the water around them began to spiral upward, forming a luminous column that connected to the night sky above. Within this column, their forms began to change visibly. Sarah's physical body became increasingly translucent, the patterns of light beneath her skin forming complex geometries that resembled the ancient petroglyphs on the canyon walls. Her hair floated upward as if underwater, each strand becoming a filament of light. Her eyes, when she opened them, shone with starlight. Tsézhiné underwent a similar transformation, though less complete. As guide rather than crosser, he maintained more of his physical form, while still manifesting spiritual energy. The witnesses stood transfixed, even the most skeptical unable to deny the profound transformation occurring before them. Thomas Reynolds had pulled a pocket notebook from his coat and was frantically sketching the scene, his scientific mind struggling to document what his education insisted was impossible. Benjamin Hawke translated the chanted words for those who couldn't understand. "Between the worlds, a bridge forms. Between the peoples, understanding grows. The crossing one walks the ancient path, carrying healing to both sides of the veil." Within the column of light, Sarah felt the final barriers dissolving. Her consciousness expanded beyond physical limitations, connecting with the canyon's ancient memories and the living awareness of the land itself. She perceived the spirit guardians gathering around the spring, witnessing and blessing the transformation. Tsézhiné's presence anchored her, preventing her essence from dispersing completely into the spirit realm. "Remember your purpose," his voice reached her, more thought than sound. "You are bridge, not solely traveler. From the spring's depths rose a glowing orb of pure energy, the concentrated essence of the threshold between worlds. It hovered before Sarah, offering the final transition. With perfect clarity and absolute certainty, Sarah extended her now luminous hands and embraced the orb. Light exploded outward in a silent concussion that momentarily blinded all witnesses. When vision returned, the transformation had completed. Sarah stood at the spring's center, her form composed of light and substance simultaneously, solid when still, ethereal when moving. Patterns of ancient power flowed across her skin like living text. Beside her, Tsézhiné remained, his transformation partial but profound. William Blackwood stared at his daughter, finally understanding that she was lost to his world. "Sarah!" he whispered, voice breaking. When she turned toward him, her smile contained both compassion and transcendence. "I am still your daughter," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that brought tears to the eyes of hardened men. "But I am also more." The transformation's completion released a pulse of energy that rippled through the canyon. For a moment, the witnesses stood in stunned silence, attempting to process what they had observed. This collective hesitation provided the opportunity Sarah and Tsézhiné needed. "The ceremony is incomplete," Elder Nantai announced, his voice cutting through the silence. "They must reach the ancient doorway before moonrise." Captain Wilson, the first to recover his professional composure, stepped forward. "Whatever just happened, Miss Blackwood remains under territorial protection. She's coming with us." "No," Thomas Reynolds interjected, surprising everyone. "Can't you see? She's not being held against her will. This is something beyond our understanding." Nahilzai positioned his warriors protectively between the settlers and the spring. "The crossing one must complete her journey. Our ancestors demand it." As tension escalated again, several of Blackwood's ranch hands raised their rifles. Sarah, perceiving the imminent violence, raised her transformed hands. The luminous energy flowing beneath her skin pulsed outward, temporarily blinding those aiming weapons. "This is my choice," she declared, her harmonically layered voice echoing from the canyon walls. "I release you from responsibility for me." "Father, I release all of you." William Blackwood lunged forward but found his path blocked by Benjamin Hawke. "Get out of my way," he demanded. "Let her go," Hawke advised quietly. "Some paths aren't meant for following." Tsézhiné, still partially transformed himself, placed his hand on the canyon wall. Where his palm touched stone, a handprint remained, not painted or carved, but burned into the living rock, glowing with the same energy that now constituted part of his being. "A marker," he explained, "so others may know the truth of what happened here." With extraordinary speed, he and Sarah moved away from the spring, deeper into the canyon network. Their partially ethereal forms allowed them to traverse the difficult terrain with fluid grace impossible for ordinary humans. Where they stepped, momentary footprints of light remained before slowly fading. "After them," Blackwood commanded. But his men hesitated, unnerved by what they had witnessed. Captain Wilson made the practical decision. In this darkness, pursuit would be suicide. These canyons are treacherous even in daylight. The Apache warriors maintained their protective stance, though no violence erupted. Elder Nantai approached William Blackwood with dignity that commanded respect despite the tension. "Your daughter fulfills an ancient prophecy," the elder explained. "Her spirit was always meant for this. The signs were there from her birth. Did you not see her connection to this land? How she understood things beyond her teaching?" Blackwood's anger gave way to grief. "You've taken my only child." "The spirits took no one," Nantai countered. "They recognized one of their own." Meanwhile, Sarah and Tsézhiné moved swiftly through passages few living people had ever traversed. The network of canyons extended far beyond what appeared on any settler's map, containing chambers and pathways known only to the most sacred Apache traditions. "How are we moving so quickly?" Sarah asked, noticing how distance seemed to compress before them. Our forms exist partially in the spirit world now, Tsézhiné explained. Distance means less there, intention guides movement more than physical effort. As they traveled, Sarah discovered new awareness of the living canyon. She could sense water flowing deep beneath the stone, feel the ancient memories embedded in the rock walls, even detect the subtle energy signatures of creatures that had passed through days earlier. Everything is connected, she marveled. Yes, Tsézhiné agreed. This understanding is why you were chosen. Few can perceive the world as it truly exists, layered with meaning and memory beyond physical appearance. They paused in a chamber decorated with particularly ancient petroglyphs. These carvings, unlike those visible to casual explorers, depicted the transformation ceremony itself, figures composed of light emerging from sacred waters. Our journey was foretold, Sarah realized, recognizing symbols that matched the patterns. Now flowing beneath her skin, many have been called over generations, Tsézhiné confirmed. Few answered. He pressed his palm against a seemingly ordinary section of wall. Where his transformed hand touched stone, another handprint burned into the rock, a permanent marker that would never erode or fade. "Why do you leave these signs?" Sarah asked. "For those who come after. The path must be marked for future generations." His eyes held ancient wisdom as he regarded her. "Your transformation is nearly complete, but the final threshold remains. Beyond that doorway lies the realm where physical and spiritual merge completely." Sarah examined her transformed body, still, recognizable as human in form, but composed partially of living light that shifted and flowed with her emotions. "Will I ever return to the world I knew?" "You will walk between worlds," Tsézhiné answered, "neither fully of one nor the other. This is the burden and gift of the Crossing One." Behind them, faintly, they could hear the search parties attempting to follow, their voices echoing from the canyon walls, but the luminous footprints they left behind were already fading, the path becoming indiscernible to ordinary perception. Dawn approached as Sarah and Tsézhiné reached the final threshold. The canyon narrowed into a passage barely wide enough for a single person, then opened suddenly into a circular chamber with walls of pure white limestone. Unlike the red sandstone dominating the region, this pale rock seemed to absorb and amplify the ethereal light emanating from their transformed bodies. The ancients called this the Doorway of Stars, Tsézhiné explained, his voice resonating with the chamber's perfect acoustics. "It exists in both worlds simultaneously." Sarah studied the limestone walls, noticing how constellations had been carefully carved into the stone, matching the patterns in the night sky above the open chamber. Ceiling. "It's a map," she realized. "A map and a door," Tsézhiné confirmed. "When the stars align with their stone counterparts at certain times, the boundary between worlds dissolves completely." Their pursuers had fallen far behind, but Sarah could sense her father's determined presence still searching through the canyon network. His anguish reached her despite the distance, the grief of a man who couldn't understand what he witnessed. "He believes he's lost me forever," she said softly. "The transition is difficult for those left behind," Tsézhiné acknowledged. "But you will not vanish completely from the physical world. The Crossing One returns when needed." The limestone chamber brightened as pre-dawn light touched its upper rim. Sarah noticed her transformation accelerating, her form becoming increasingly luminescent, the patterns beneath her skin growing more complex and brilliant. "What's happening?" she asked, watching her hands shift between solid and translucent with each movement. "The final alignment approaches," Tsézhiné explained. "Your physical form prepares to harmonize with your spirit essence." In the distance, voices echoed through the canyon. The search parties had regrouped at first light and were following the trail of subtle energy their passage had left. Soon they would discover the limestone chamber. "Will they try to stop us?" Sarah asked. "They cannot stop what is already ordained," Tsézhiné assured her, "but their presence could disrupt the harmony of the crossing." He placed his hand on the chamber wall, leaving another glowing handprint burned into the stone. Then, with ceremonial precision, he removed his medicine pouch and hung it on a small projection of rock. "A marker and protection," he explained. "Those who follow will know we passed willingly into the next phase." The chamber's design revealed its purpose as the angle of sunlight changed. Beams entered through precisely positioned openings in the ceiling, striking specific constellations, carved into the walls. As each star symbol illuminated, it began to glow with the same energy that now constituted Sarah's transformed body. "The door opens," Tsézhiné said quietly. Their transformation accelerated with each activated star symbol. Sarah's remaining physical garments, the simple shift she had reduced her wedding dress to, began to dissolve into particles of light. Tsézhiné's form similarly shed its final physical constraints. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Sarah considered the question honestly. "No," she realized. "This feels like remembering rather than becoming something new." As the chamber filled with increasingly brilliant light, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of rightness, as though her entire life had been preparation for this moment. The uncomfortable sense of not belonging that had shadowed her since childhood finally made sense. She had always been meant for this threshold crossing. The voices of the search party grew closer. They would reach the chamber within minutes. "It's time," Tsézhiné said, extending his hand to her. "The final steps must be taken together." Sarah placed her luminous hand in his. Where they touched, their energies merged, creating patterns, more complex than either displayed individually. Together, they moved toward the chamber's far wall, where a vertical fissure in the limestone reached from floor to ceiling. The approaching sunrise positioned a beam of light precisely on this fissure, revealing it as more than a simple crack in the stone. Within its depths, stars seemed to shine, a portal to somewhere beyond ordinary perception. Their footsteps now left permanent impressions of light, no longer fading, but burning into the stone floor with each step. The trail led directly to the illuminated fissure, creating a path of glowing footprints that climbed inexplicably upward along the vertical wall. Sarah paused at the threshold, sensing the monumental nature of the final step. Behind them, the voices of the searchers had reached the chamber entrance. "Sarah!" William Blackwood's desperate call echoed through the limestone chamber. She turned, her transformed face radiating compassionate understanding. For a brief moment, father and daughter gazed at each other across an unbridgeable divide, one anchored in the physical world, the other already partially beyond it. "I am not lost, father," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that brought tears to his eyes. "I am found." With that final farewell, Sarah and Tsézhiné stepped into the illuminated fissure, their forms elongated, transformed into pure light, and vanished into the stone itself. The glowing footprints remained, climbing impossibly up, the vertical surface before ending at the solid rock, the only evidence of their passage into a realm beyond human understanding. William Blackwood stood motionless before the limestone wall where his daughter had vanished. His weathered hand reached out to touch the glowing footprints that defied natural law, climbing vertically up the stone surface before disappearing. The luminous tracks felt warm beneath his fingers, pulsing with subtle energy. "Where did they go?" he asked, voice hollow with grief and wonder. Benjamin Hawke and Thomas Reynolds had joined him in the chamber, while Captain Wilson kept his men at a respectful distance. None had weapons drawn any longer. What they had witnessed transcended ordinary conflict. "She crossed the threshold," Elder Nantai explained, "having been helped to the chamber by Nahilzai. She walks now in the space between worlds." "Is she dead?" Thomas asked carefully. "No," Nantai replied with certainty. "Death is an ending. The crossing one transforms. Her essence continues, though differently than before." The Apache warriors maintained a ceremonial silence, honoring the sacred site. Several knelt to pray, acknowledging the rare manifestation of ancient power they had witnessed. Captain Wilson, practical despite his awe, made notes in a small field journal. "The territorial governor will require some explanation," he muttered. To himself. "And what exactly will you report, Captain?" Thomas asked with unexpected sharpness. "That an Apache medicine man transformed a rancher's daughter into a being of light who walked into solid rock. They'll have you committed." Wilson closed his journal with a snap. "Perhaps some matters are best left to tribal authorities." Thomas's scientific curiosity had overcome his personal disappointment. He examined the handprints burned into the stone, recording their positions and appearance. "These will never erode," he noted. "The energy has fundamentally altered the molecular structure of the limestone." Blackwood finally turned from the wall, his expression transformed by grief and revelation. The proud, controlling rancher had been broken by events beyond his comprehension. "She said she wasn't lost," he whispered. "What did she mean?" "The crossing. One returns when needed," Nantai explained gently. "She is not gone forever from this world, only transformed beyond its limitations." As morning light filled the chamber completely, something unexpected happened. The handprints left by Tsézhiné began to pulse with increased brilliance. Energy flowed from them into the glowing footprints, then up the wall to the point of vanishing. For a moment, the fissure in the limestone illuminated again, revealing a brief glimpse of what lay beyond. A landscape of impossible beauty, where light and matter intermingled freely. Then the vision faded, leaving only the permanent markers of their passage. The disparate groups, settlers, soldiers, and Apache, emerged from the canyon network as unlikely allies bound by shared witness to the inexplicable. Word spread quickly through the territory. By nightfall, curious onlookers had begun arriving at Blackwood Ranch, hoping to glimpse the canyon where a bride had vanished on her wedding day. Thomas Reynolds, rather than departing with his family as expected, remained behind. That evening, he began the first of many journal entries documenting the event. "I cannot reconcile what I witnessed today with my scientific understanding of the world. Sarah Blackwood, my intended bride, transformed before my eyes into something beyond ordinary human existence. I watched her walk into solid stone, leaving behind footprints of light that even now continue to glow with undiminished radiance. The rational part of my mind insists there must be some scientific explanation, yet I find myself considering possibilities I would have dismissed as superstition merely yesterday." Captain Wilson submitted a carefully worded report describing an unexplained disappearance, while omitting the supernatural elements that would have undermined his professional reputation. Governor Adams, recognizing political complications, ordered the report sealed. The Morrow family's involvement in the poisoning came to light when Robert, overwhelmed by guilt after learning of Sarah's transformation, confessed to territorial authorities. His father, James, was arrested for attempted murder, though Robert received leniency for his voluntary confession. Benjamin Hawke found himself in the unexpected role of intermediary between cultures. With Sarah gone and Tsézhiné departed, he became the primary translator of what had occurred. "Two worlds touched," he explained to those who asked. "For a moment, the veil between them thinned enough for passage." William Blackwood returned to his ranch a changed man. The control and certainty that had defined his character crumbled in the face of mystery beyond his comprehension. That night, alone in his study, he opened his late wife's journal for the first time in years, searching for clues he might have missed. There, in Elizabeth's delicate handwriting, he found an entry from shortly before Sarah's birth. "I dreamed again of the canyon spirits. They showed me my daughter, glowing within a light, walking between worlds. I don't understand the vision, but it brings me peace rather than fear." 1 year after Sarah's transformation, the canyon had become a place of pilgrimage. A stone marker stood at its entrance, bearing inscriptions in both English and Apache, the result of an unprecedented agreement between territorial authorities. and tribal leaders. The marker read simply, "Sacred ground. In this place, worlds touched." Thomas Reynolds, who had abandoned his return to Boston in favor of studying the phenomenon, supervised the placement of the marker. His meticulous documentation of the event had expanded into a scholarly pursuit that defied conventional academic categories. "The handprints remain unchanged," he noted in his journal on the anniversary of Sarah's crossing. "The luminescence has neither dimmed nor fluctuated regardless of conditions. No known substance behaves this way, maintaining energy output without apparent source or degradation." The Blackwood Ranch had transformed as well. William Blackwood, once the territory's most aggressive cattle baron, had withdrawn from business affairs to focus on a more contemplative existence. The wedding pavilion where Sarah had collapsed remained standing, repurposed as a gathering place where settlers and Apache alike could share stories and seek understanding. "He's a different man," Abigail observed to Benjamin Hawke as they watched. Blackwood conversing with Elder Nantai through an interpreter. "The hardness is gone from him," Hawke nodded. "Some experiences humble even the proudest hearts." The anniversary gathering drew visitors from throughout the territory, witnesses to the original event, curious newcomers, and those seeking healing or wisdom. Captain Wilson, now promoted to major, represented territorial authorities with a small honor guard. His official report still maintained careful ambiguity about what had occurred, but privately he had become a believer. "I've seen things in this territory that defy explanation," he confided to Thomas Reynolds, "but nothing like what happened in that canyon." As sunset approached, the diverse gathering moved toward the canyon entrance for a ceremony that had emerged spontaneously in the months following the event. Apache singers began traditional songs while settlers stood in respectful silence. Elder Nantai, frailer but still commanding respect, presided over the observance. "The crossing one showed us that boundaries between peoples, like boundaries between worlds, can be traversed through understanding," he said, his words translated by Benjamin Hawke. "This knowledge is her first gift to us." The practical effects of Sarah's transformation had manifested throughout the year. The long-standing tensions between settlers and Apache had eased considerably. While full trust remained distant, the shared witness to something beyond ordinary understanding had created common ground. Governor Adams had declared the canyon and surrounding area protected land, neither to be developed by settlers nor restricted from Apache access. This unprecedented arrangement became known locally as the Crossing Ground Treaty, though official territorial documents used more conventional terminology. As night fell completely, something remarkable occurred. The handprints and footprints within the canyon began to glow with increased intensity, visible even from the gathering at the entrance. Those closest to the phenomenon reported hearing harmonies that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. "It responds to the anniversary," Thomas theorized, taking careful notes. "Time itself may function differently in relation to the crossing point." William Blackwood stood apart from the crowd, his face illuminated by the distant glow within the canyon. Abigail approached with a shawl against the evening chill. "She said she wasn't lost," Blackwood remarked quietly. "I begin to understand what she meant." The most significant development of the year had been the formation of a joint council, Apache, elders and respected settlers who together maintained the sacred site and interpreted its significance for visitors. Benjamin Hawke had emerged as the natural leader of this unusual coalition, his background in both worlds providing unique perspective. "We don't claim to understand everything that happened," Hawke explained to newcomers. "We only know that something profound occurred here, something that changed how we see our place in the world." The limestone chamber where Sarah and Tsézhiné had vanished became the focus of particular interest. Scientists who attempted to study the glowing handprints and footprints found their instruments malfunctioning or returning impossible readings. The vertical trail that defied gravity remained unchanged, a permanent reminder of barriers transcended. As the anniversary ceremony concluded, Elder Nantai asked the gathering to join hands. Apache and settler forming a circle of unity that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. The Crossing One walks between worlds still, the elder reminded them. Her journey continues, as does ours. What matters is that we now walk our different paths side by side rather than in opposition. The canyon kept its deepest secrets, but its message of unity had been received and embraced by those wise enough to listen. 5 years after Sarah Blackwood vanished into the limestone wall, the annual ceremony at the canyon had grown into a territorial institution. Visitors from as far as San Francisco and St. Louis made the journey to witness the commemoration, though most departed disappointed, having experienced nothing more dramatic than singing and speeches. William Blackwood, now 70 and visibly aged beyond his years, insisted on attending despite failing health. Abigail accompanied him faithfully, supporting his arm as they made the increasingly difficult journey to the canyon entrance. "This will likely be my last ceremony," he confided to Thomas Reynolds, who had become something of a son to him in the intervening years. Thomas had married Abigail 2 years earlier, their shared experience of the transformation having forged an unexpected bond. "You say that every year, sir," Thomas replied with gentle humor. "This time I mean it." Blackwood patted the pocket containing his wife's journal, which rarely left his possession now. "Elizabeth visits my dreams more frequently. She says our daughter is well." Thomas, whose scientific rigor had initially dismissed such notions, had learned to suspend judgment. His 5 years of studying the phenomenon had convinced him that conventional understanding could not encompass what had occurred in the canyon. "I believe you," he said simply. The ceremony proceeded as established by tradition. Elder Nantai had passed the previous winter, but his grandson, trained in the sacred knowledge, led the Apache prayers. Benjamin Hawke, now serving as Indian agent for the territory, translated for the mixed audience. As twilight deepened into true night, the familiar glow appeared within the canyon, the handprints and footprints illuminating as they did each anniversary. The gathered witnesses observed a moment of reverent silence. What happened next broke the established pattern of previous years. The glow intensified dramatically, spreading from the markers to the canyon walls themselves. Wind rose suddenly, though the evening had been still, carrying harmonics that resonated with the stone. "Something's different," Thomas whispered, instinctively reaching for his notebook. The limestone chamber at the canyon's heart, invisible from the entrance but connected through some mystical property, began emanating pulses of light that illuminated the entire network of passages. Those familiar with the site had never witnessed such a display. William Blackwood straightened, his frailty momentarily falling away. "She's coming," he said with absolute certainty. A column of light appeared at the canyon entrance, not descending from above, but emerging from the stone itself. Within this radiance, 2 figures took shape gradually, becoming more distinct with each passing moment. Their forms were humanoid, but composed of light and substance intermingled, shifting between solid and ethereal with each movement. The gathered crowd drew back in collective awe, creating space for the manifestation. Only William Blackwood stepped forward, drawn by recognition beyond rational explanation. "Sarah," he breathed, his aged eyes filling with tears. The figures solidified further, becoming recognizable as Sarah and Tsézhiné, though transformed beyond ordinary humanity. Their bodies emanated soft radiance, and patterns of light still moved beneath their skin like living constellations. Their eyes held depth and knowledge that transcended mortal experience. "Father," Sarah acknowledged, her voice carrying the same harmonic overtones that had marked her transformation. "We have returned briefly." Tsézhiné stood beside her, his transformed presence equally powerful. "The threshold thins on this anniversary, Passage becomes possible for those who have crossed before. William Blackwood reached trembling fingers toward his daughter, but stopped short of touching her luminous form. "Are you happy?" he asked, the question containing all a father's concern, distilled to its essence. Sarah's smile conveyed peace beyond ordinary understanding. "I exist in ways I cannot fully explain. What I have seen and become is beyond happiness or sadness. It is completion." The gathering remained silent, witnessing the reunion with collective respect. Benjamin Hawke knelt briefly, acknowledging the sacred nature of the moment. Thomas Reynolds observed with scholarly attention that couldn't fully mask his emotional response. "The worlds grow distant again," Tsézhiné announced. "Our time is brief." Sarah addressed the gathering, her gaze encompassing Apache and settler alike. "Continue what began here. The boundaries between peoples, like the boundaries between worlds, exist mainly in perception. You have begun to understand this." As their forms began to fade, Sarah turned once more to her father. "We are not separated, only experiencing differently. When your time comes, you will understand." William Blackwood nodded, acceptance replacing grief in his weathered features. "Your mother always knew," he said softly. "She saw this in her dreams." "Yes," Sarah confirmed as her form became increasingly translucent. "She walks between worlds now also. She guided our return tonight." As the luminous figures faded completely, a gentle wind swept through the canyon. Where they had stood, two feathers remained, one white, one black, intertwined in a spiral pattern impossible to separate. William Blackwood carefully lifted this gift, understanding its significance without explanation. The assembled witnesses remained in reverent silence as the canyon's glow gradually returned to its normal intensity. The boundary between worlds had thinned momentarily, offering a glimpse of mysteries beyond ordinary perception. It would be another year before the anniversary returned, but the dual feather would remain, physical evidence of beings who walked between worlds and the enduring connection that transcended ordinary limitations.